Tonight we are privileged to have Blair with us, Blair and Julie with us. Blair was born in Ogden, Utah, and grew up in North Ogden, where he attended elementary and junior high school. During those early years, he learned that he had a talent for sculpture and was encouraged to develop that talent by several art teachers in junior and high school. Quote, I discovered in junior high that it was possible to make a living doing what I did for fun, art. So during the rest of my schooling, I tried to find what kind of art I was best at, and I settled on sculpture. After graduating from Weber High, Blair enrolled at Ricks College, and after graduating, transferred to Utah State University, and then to Brigham Young University, which he attended with both academic and athletic scholarships. I transferred to BYU because it had the only sculpture professor in the West teaching the fundamentals of traditional figurative sculpture. And while at BYU, I had the opportunity to play football for Coach Lavelle Edwards. You must have known Mel Olson then. He and I were companions together in Texas. He taught me the importance of surrounding myself with good, capable people. Other professors taught me that education does not stop with a degree. Experience has taught me to do what I do best and let others do what they do best, and then I don't have to be the expert on everything. I've always been fascinated with the human figure, the traditional human figure. I like the challenge of capturing the gesture, mood, and expression of a person in thought. I particularly like that one bronze sculpture of the Native Americans talking to the, was that Jim Bridger, whoever that is, where they're just listening and thinking about it all. It's amazing. As well as the intensity of a skilled athlete in action. The unique combination of artist and athlete has opened many doors for my career. My knowledge of sports came from hands-on experience as a college athlete. I'm now very honored to be able to work personally with some of the greatest football players to ever play the game. Over the past 35 years, I've completed more than 115 busts of new inductees for the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. A member of the Prix de West Society and a founding member of the Northwest Rendezvous Group, Blair is also a fellow in the National Sculpture Society. Blair's traditional training has prepared him well. Always a student of his craft, he continues to push himself to learn new skills and techniques. The first two phases of the largest and most challenging project of Blair's career were completed in 2009. In a collaborative effort, he and fellow sculptors Ed Fraughton and Kent Oberg have produced larger-than-life-size works for downtown Omaha, Nebraska. Blair and Ed's part of this project was the creation of a wagon train, 1 city block long. Blair accepted this new and daunting task as yet another opportunity to broaden his skills. In 2013, Blair was asked to complete this project with the installation of Native Americans, mountain men, and, most recently, a handcart family. Blair anticipates this last phase will keep him busy through 2027. Along with his figurative work, he has now sculpted wagons, mules, oxen, horses, and other animals. He loves the Old West and is excited to have had the opportunity to permanently capture its spirit as exemplified by the early pioneers. I am not an artist, I'm a historian, but from my vantage point, I've never seen anything better than the wonderful work that you have done downtown Omaha. If there is anyone that hasn't been down there, after this hour together, we're going downtown. And if you don't go down, well, we'll have to do it some other time. But let's give Blair a hand of applause.
Well, it's great to be here, all the way from Alpine, Utah. I'd forgotten that about that introduction. That was something. I am really grateful for this opportunity to share some of the things that I've been working on here in Omaha since 2000. We started this project in 2000. There was about a 3 or 4 year break in there after 2010, and now we're back on finalizing that last little bit. What I'd like to talk about is really to introduce you to this project. Has anybody not been there and seen the project downtown? You haven't? Okay. What it is Bruce, my talk is really about the inspiration and to installation. Bruce Lawrenson, the president of the First National Bank of Omaha, came up with, he was going to move the bank out into, have a big campus out of town, and decided to move it downtown to help rejuvenate downtown. I just remember when I first started this project, coming from the airport downtown was just full of rusted steel all along the river. It has definitely changed and it's beautiful now. So his idea was to bring all his other buildings and build the 40-story tower downtown. But he also wanted to bring something to the town and to Omaha and have that so he wanted to have parks that the people could enjoy. So he bought a parking lot on the corner of 14th and Capitol, a block long, and an empty lot next to the lot that he was going to build this 40-story headquarters. And in his mind, he wanted to have these capture the edge of the frontier and the wildlife of Nebraska. And so his idea, he went and he hired an art agent out of St. Louis and to go find the artists. And I was working with this art agent he had my portfolio and he was going around the country because I'd been doing monuments of sports figures out in front of stadiums and complexes around the country, and he was promoting that. And he kept telling me, he told me there was this big project, but he couldn't tell me about it, but it's in the wings. And I said, well, then later he said, well, it looks like they're going to do it. And I said, what is it? And he said, it's a wagon train, a block long, in bronze. And I laughed. I said, well, that's not going to happen once he realizes how long it's going to take and the cost. And he said, well, I tried to tell him all that, but he still wants to do it. So he said, well, who are the top Western sculptors in the country? And I gave him a list. My name was not on that list. It was a wagon train, a block long. And he told me there were some pillars also going to be downtown with some historical things up on top. And I said, I'm interested in those. So he said, well, I have your portfolio. And he put it in. And I came back as a finalist on the Four Corners and the wagon train. And my mentor and good friend Ed Fronten that I had put on that top of that list was also a finalist for the Four Corners and the wagon train. So I went to him and I said, Ed, you and I have been talking about doing a big project together for a long time. Now's the time. Or you can do a wagon train a block long by yourself. I'm not interested. And he said, okay, I think that would work well. So we presented together and we ended up getting the commission along with a really good friend of ours, Kent Olberg, who was, his training was a taxidermist in Europe and lives in, out of Colorado. And they also chose a great landscape architect, Jim Reeves, out of New Hampshire. So what I've got is just kind of an overview of how this is happening. I'm going to have a tough time taking 20 years down into this time period, but I'm going to do a little video. What's great is from our art agent from the very beginning had a great idea. Let's film and document everything along the way. So we had a great videographer come from Kansas, and he came once or twice a year and filmed whatever we were working on. And then after 10 years, put it together for a great documentary. This is just a little snippet of that I want to show. I hope so. Okay, I guess it's by moving around, it'll come up in a minute. So this documentary that was done, it was able to bring apart all the different stages each one of us were doing along the way, and brought it together in a way that's is a lot of fun. But as we were I got some about the team. Nothing yet? Just a second. Hey. Can you show the pictures? Uh-oh. This is what I didn't want to happen. But we had a great team, and being able to bring everyone together was really something. Once we were all chosen, we all came to my house in Utah from Colorado, New Hampshire, and St. Louis, and here in Omaha, and we were able to do a brainstorm session. Okay, we had a edge of the frontier, a block long, and a block and a half, 2 blocks away was an empty lot that was going to represent the wildlife, and he wanted that combined in some way. So we came down, and I sent my wife and kids away for a weekend, and we just brainstormed downstairs, and that was just a magical.
Just do that. Sorry.
We just had a magical moment at a couple of days of coming up with the idea of how this is going to work. How are we going to combine these two parks and the edge of the frontier and wildlife? So we came up with a story where the wagons come into the valley where the buffalo are grazing and scare the buffalo, and they take off running around the corner and scare a flock of Canadian geese that were in a pond or in the lake. And they burst out of the water and fly around downtown, fly away. So what was really fun is when we were doing this, we came up with the idea of having 2 time periods existing at the same time. You have the edge of the frontier. Come west to Omaha, get your snacks, get your gas, get your fill up, next stop is California. Okay? Then you bring in the modern city and on top, existing at the same time, one not knowing of the other. So, as it was depicted, okay, this is the, there's me, Kent Oldberg, Ed Fronten. Can we turn this run back? This is Steve Booty, the art, and there is Bruce Lawrenson, standing by himself. And then this is the master of all, Jim Reeves. He was in that room, he was like the conductor of the symphony, bringing all these ideas, and we wrote them down on the big whiteboard, and to come up with that was amazing. Then he took from that and started doing his drawings. This was the city block, and we originally had a river coming down, that the wagons were going in and out of the river. Coming down this braided, we called it the braided river. We were trying to talk the city into doing these little pavers that would go all the way down that 15th. And here is the wildlife next to the tower of the headquarters of the bank. So, as two time periods existing at the same time, the buffalo running away from the wagons round the corner, and he goes through the corner of the parking garage as if it didn't exist. And also the geese, as they burst out of the water, they're flying through the Doubletree Hotel, the brick, as if it doesn't exist, flying right through it. But another thing that Kent's was to do is go from traditional bronze, going towards a modern building, modern material, going from traditional bronze to modern stainless steel. So they were morphing as they flew away from the pond. You can see that there's stainless steel along with the marking, the white markings on the goose became stainless steel. And by the time they hit the, I just love this shot, they put jets of the water just under the water, and so that it looked like they were bursting out. There was action going on. But here are they're stainless steel flying through the atrium of the bank. And this is the drawings of the park. With the 4 wagons, we got to, I did a little idea of sculpting the berm, a raised berm with an outcropping of rock on top, and then Jim Reeves took that and did this drawing. And, so it's kind of the idea of kind of going along the riverbed instead of going through it. And the client said, I don't want to have a Blair section and an Ed section. You guys are doing this together. Let's break it up so that there's things that will follow, so there's a seamless break between the two of the sculptures we're doing. So we did every other. The first 2 wagons, we divided the whole thing into 3 phases. The first phase, we did it that way so that if the artist, after completing the first phase, if they wanted out, they could. Same with the client. And then, so there was a built-in out if we needed to. And so the first phase was the first 2 wagons. And then this is mine and this is Ed's. This is Ed's second wagon and my second wagon. And then we had people walking and riding horses and as fillers along the way. And the idea of phase 3 was right here, where that's going to be the Native Americans. So what we did is we did a 4x8 sheet of plywood and did these little, what we call squishies, just little figures that didn't really, it just shows that this is a wagon, this is a horse and rider. We originally had a boy herding sheep, all kinds of stuff were in there at the beginning. But to follow that S going through the downtown. And so that was just an idea. That's just kind of laying out who does what and where. And we also had to decide on the size. Ed wanted to do it 1.5 life size. So that meant a 6-foot man will be 9 feet tall. So as you see, Ed's standing next to a 9-foot figure. That was his proposal. And here, you can't see it, but there's a drawing of a wagon. But that is the top of the wagon, and here's a 6-foot man. So it's about the size of a semi-truck trailer, okay? And so my proposal was to do it 1.25 life size. So a 6-foot man would be 7.5 feet tall. So I said, we're both willing to do whatever you want, but the question is, do you want to be a viewer? Do you want the people to stand back and look at this, go, wow, and go on? Or do you want them to stop the car, get out, and walk alongside of it and experience a wagon train going west, the pioneers? Do you want them to be a viewer or a participant? And luckily, they like the idea of being a participant and taking part in that. So we went with the 1.25. So what I'm showing you here is how there's a lot to it. Here is a new word for you. It's called maquette. Maquette is a French word for a 3-dimensional sketch. Just like a sketchbook, you're making little drawings, you're putting down your ideas. That is a 3-dimensional sketch of a handcart. And here is a scale model. So my next step is to do a scale model, which is 1/4. So now a 6-foot man is 18 inches tall. But that is real important because I have to figure everything out, because with the scale model, I have aluminum wire that's bendable.
Could we get everybody to turn off their cell phones? We're not getting enough bandwidth to get the computer to hook up that.
Is that what it is?
Could be, I think that's so.
We'll try it.
And Blair, the ringing comes when you get underneath the speaker.
Okay. Go to the side. Okay. Okay. Does it work out? So this is the picture of the handcart family, of the boy on the back. So here's the maquette, the scale model, and the full size. So here is 1/4 scale and 1.25 scale. So I enlarge everything 5 times bigger. Okay. And so I was saying that the aluminum wire and stuff I can bend and twist and turn on the little one, but when I get to the big full size, it's now it's now steel and rebar. I'm not bending an arm. So I have to make sure that design on the scale model is right, so it's right on the big one. So here's my maquettes of the first 2, phase 1 and phase 2. The poor family, or the ones that didn't have the covered wagon, but I'm just looking to find where I want people and things that they could possibly be doing. And then here is the scale, finished scale models of each one of them. I'm just going to give you a quick little art lesson of design, because to me, composition and design is everything. You want, as an artist, as a child, I used to love to draw Norman Rockwell. Anything I could get a hold of Norman Rockwell, I loved it. Didn't understand why everyone else did, but he is a master of controlling what you see and when you see it in that canvas. Now that I studied, I was going into illustration and design as a way of making a living until I could sculpt someday. So I'm lucky enough to, but anyway, what I'm going to show you is the things I'm thinking about as I'm designing. So I want you to see that here's a little girl looking up and trying to catch up with mom. Her mom's looking up at the boy and down. So it's just a pyramid. And everything, the shovel, the things on the cloth are aiming towards the boy. And here is the boy looking about around the back, the big sister at the mom, and she's looking at their daughter and ahead. But what do you do with this big box? So I did the drapery on the covered wagon in a way that your eye comes down and up, and I opened up here because there's a contrast because light and dark, you see this, and then you go, the oxen on here are bigger than the ones up front, so there is this natural arc going on that takes you around so you can see the head of the father up front. So I'm thinking all this thing. In sculpture, you want to be able to, the person to want to see what's on the other side. You want them to walk around it because it's done in 3 dimensions. Different than a painting or a drawing, it's just you put it on the wall. So I joke with my painter friends that, yeah, that's great. Now I have to figure out all the other side. You just worry about one. I have to do all the rest. So here's me working on my scale model with the large one behind me. So you understand the scale difference. 1/4, 1 1/4. And the wagon master. One of the fun things is, for me, I like to use, being a portrait sculptor, I like to be able to use people so that everyone doesn't look the same. I've done enough eyes and noses and ears that if I don't have a model in front of me, they all look the same. They're all cousins. So I decided to use my beautiful wife and my 2 daughters as my models for my first wagon and my son. So we got them dressed up. We had a fun time dressing them up and had them walk and do the things I had planned for them that I designed, and measured them and had my daughter run, and I videotaped her running so I could pick out what angles I liked. So there's my daughter and my wife posing for the portraits. I wasn't so much trying to make it look like them as make sure that they had personality and the feel of a real person. And as I was thinking about this, using my family as my models, I realized I don't want some stranger taking my family across the plains. So I put myself in there. And the good thing about it is I got to make myself younger and thinner. And I was working with the next wagon. When the owner of the bank saw what I did with my first wagon, and I'm starting on the second wagon, he thought, wouldn't that be great if let's put my family in there. And so, but his kids were all adults at the time. So he and his wife picked the age they wanted them portrayed, gave me all their great, fourth grade pictures and stuff so that I could age them back to that age. And so this is their middle daughter. And see, here she is as an adult. And these are the pictures of her as a kid. So I tried to capture the life, of her. What she's doing is running alongside of the ox with a stick. And she's hitting the side of the ox. And he's going, what are you doing? Like, getting rid of a fly. So he's at least looking at her and she's having a great time. But I love, trying to get that expression. Rather than trying to make it up, I used a person. So here's my son. He's up on top of the wagon. And here he is posing at that pyramid I was telling you about. But and all the folds and everything leading towards him. And my youngest daughter, Josie, is sitting next to me holding the doll. And I've got a little vignette or just the skeletal model that I've made. It's just of the two of us sitting on the bench, and I call it Daddy-Daughter Date. And that's in the galleries that I sell in. So here's some pictures of just showing. I've got to go research all the clothing and get them accurate. And so I take pictures of the cloth. I've got to be able to think from the inside out. I think as a sculptor and as any kind of artist, you think from the bone, you think of the structure, bone, muscle, skin, clothes, inside out. So I've got to figure out where the elbow is, where the wrist is, and make sure that the shoulder is. So if I'm sculpting a leg, I would sculpt the nude leg, and I just put the folds on. I wouldn't put a layer of clay on top of this. I just put the folds on. So it looks like now the cloth is draping off of the body. The body is more important. The body controls the cloth. It's not the other way around. Someone that doesn't understand that, the figures all look really stiff. Because they're concerned about the button and the seam more than they are that there's a chest underneath. This is my wife's niece and her family for the last Hancock family. So they're dressed up in my studio, and I would film them or take snapshots of them and work from those. This is Liz of the full size. One of the fun things about this is I really had fun with the lace cloth of the shawl and the bonnet, just to do something different and dealing with textures and making it as fun as you can as you walk around. Do we have? Still doesn't? Okay, we might not get a video. So I had a lot of fun, and research is a big part of this. What do you do? I had a lady that was a seamstress, or she was over the costumes at BYU Film Department. She was retired, and she helped us make all the cloth, the outfits, the pioneer cloth. And I was able to, when I came time to do the Native Americans, where do I get an Indian to pose for me, and how, and all that authentic gear and costuming. And I asked, at some of the national shows, I asked some of my painter friends, what do you guys do? And they said there are people that you hire they gave me the name of a guy up in Oregon who was Native American, and that was part of his business, was having the authentic clothes and gear for the and animals and teepees and all that stuff. And the painter would hire them for the day and set up, and they would tell them what to do, and they're filming. And they would spend a whole day with all these different scenes, and then they have a year's worth of reference material to do their great paintings from. Well, I called the guy, he'd never worked with a sculptor before, so I did the same thing. Is what?
We're close, we're so close.
So, well, I was able to go and follow this guy, and he set up a camp for me and the other painters. I rented him for a couple of days.
You're back.
And this was he dressed up for me. This is the guy that owned the material. And he got up and I told him how I wanted him to be and everything. And I do, I want to wait, just until I get through the Indian. So, where am I? You just look at all the color and all that's on him. See here, as a painter, that would be beautiful. You've got all these great colors to deal with, the feathers and the beadwork and all that in bright colors. But in sculpture, all I'm dealing with is light and shadow. If I want something to be dark, I dig a hole. If I want a dark-eyed person, I dig a deeper hole. If it's light blue, I don't go as deep. I'm dealing with black and white. So I transfer the pictures I get into black and white, and now I can see the form. The color, for me, gets in the way. So here's my little maquette for what I call trading for directions. But this one, I was trying to make it so this little group, here's a mountain man coming up. He's looking for the best trail for the wagons. He chance meeting he's going west. The Indians are going north for the summer and the springtime, and they get together and he's saying, where is this best trail? He's showing, but I wanted them to, he's saying, where do I go from here? And the Indian was pointing across the street. But as you can see, hopefully you can see, the conversation works here between the mountain man and this Indian, but this guy's in his own that hand goes whoop. You see this conversation, whoop. So I changed it. Now those are the Indians that had the Little Bighorn in Montana reservations. I had two brothers, Cheyenne brothers, and one Sioux friend dress up for me. And I videotaped and took pictures all the way around and measured them and took pictures for their portraits. And it was just a great fun day for me. But there is the scale model. And what I changed this for the kneeling Indian to be in the conversation. So design-wise, you go down the rifle, the musket, down to the trade goods, down here, and then you go up around the feathers, top of the head, to the brim of the hat, down the arm, to him, to the map. So it's just a way of zeroing in. I want the conversation of these three guys together. So the story is, he's up there, he's asking, where is the best trail? Pulls out a map, and he's pointing to him saying, where is this canyon? Where is this river? And this guy is going, what's a map? What is paper? What are you showing me? So the expression on his face of being curious, hopefully you can go up there now and see that and say, he's looking at it going, maybe if I stare a little farther, I can figure out what this is. Another thing I got to do, I do Mountain Men. So every year, there's a Mountain Men rendezvous at Fort Bridger in Wyoming on Labor Day weekend. So I went up there, walked around, they're doing reenactments, they're selling their goods as a rendezvous would do. And I just fell in love with the guy that was selling his beads. And that face, I went and took some pictures of him. And he doesn't know it yet, but now he's in Omaha, Nebraska. And this is just to show you what I try to do with the portfolio. I try to give everybody an expression and a feeling. And this is the owner of the bank's wife, Kim, and she's leading her kids, leading on the second wagon. Their two kids are on a horse, and it's called Loving Guidance. And I just love that. I tried to capture the love that she has for her kids, an expression there, and that's her oldest daughter. So I'm just going to go real quick through the kind of the steps because of how this is done. The bronzing process hasn't changed since the Greeks. So if you want to know about the process, look it up. It's called the lost wax process and doing bronze. So I'm not going to spend all the time doing it, but I just want you, the main thing is once the scale model is done, we have it scanned. And we tell us to enlarge everything 5 times bigger. So they cut out of big blocks of foam body parts 5 times bigger. And I get this big container full of foam body parts that we put together and with rebar and steel inside holding it up. Well, so what you're seeing is the big cutter, and you're cutting the torso of the father of one of the wagons. So that's his legs, and it's being cut away. So now we're putting together the wagon master in foam. So up on this one it's kind of like a cookie jar. We've got the lid taken off, and we put a big plate of stainless steel, and then we weld each leg to that plate of steel, and the tail and the head. And then we put the big cookie jar lid back on it, and that steel is now embedded inside. And we're putting we put a steel rod, and we start adding those pieces on until we've got the big foam wagon master. Then I take and I carve the whole thing where the machine couldn't get to. And also, I got to check all the measurements. Because if I miss the measurement between here and here, or the width of a hand on the scale model, that mistake is now 5 times bigger. It doesn't just enlarge the good things. Everything is enlarged. So we had this is my family, this is the family night. Come down to the studio and put clay on. So here are my kids putting the clay on the wagon master. And then I start all over again, sculpting. But now I know where the landmarks are. I know where the eye socket is. I know where the jaw is. And I can, it's a lot faster and easier. So it all kind of comes together, but there's foam inside of all that. Then we paint it with rubber. We start the mold process, and it peels off when it's, you cut and you peel it off. But that goes into the bronzing. What I really want you to know is the bronzes are hollow. People always want to say, well, that's a lot of bronze. Are they solid? Said, no, they're only about a 1/4 inch thick. And they're done in sections. The mold, each mold, they would section off an arm, and so that would be one piece. And then they will weld that on later. So here is the founderman inside the belly of the mule, welding the pieces together, but there's the jigsaw pieces of the father and the wagon. Just, I got body parts. It's a 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Okay, and they weld that together. So you can see the pieces that are welded. And then they will complete the weld and grind it back and work on it. And when I come, they'll give me a Sharpie, and if I can see where their work is, I'll mark it until their work disappears and mine is there. So you don't see the seams. On the top of that first wagon I did with my boy on top, there was close to 30 jigsaw puzzle, 30 pieces on that, just the top of it. So when they're done, then we got to get them to Omaha. We put it on the big truck. Can this happen now?
Consultant was telling me about this big project in the future. He finally told me what it was. It was a what?
One second. That's why I'm here, to do all this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Tech Lansing.
Well, thank you. All right, now we'll
Our consultant was telling me about this big project in the future. He finally told me what it was. It was a wagon train a block long, and I laughed. I thought, that's not gonna happen.
I used the cityscape as a metaphor for wilderness. And so I used the city as a canvas for my work, 4 city block. So first of all, of course, it's a tremendous privilege for an artist to be given part of a city as a canvas to work with.
You really have to set aside the rest of your life and really totally dedicate yourself to it. Now this will be, by the time the project is finished, probably 10 years of my life.
For more than a decade, 3 world-renowned sculptors and one of America's foremost landscape architects have been creating what is now one of the world's largest installations of heroic scale bronze sculptures. 120 pieces, all 1 1/4 life size, stretching over and through 5 city blocks in downtown Omaha, Nebraska. They portray the interaction between a pioneer wagon train and the magnificent wildlife of the Great Plains on a typical spring day in 1841. Each of the wagon's families, their livestock and equipment, represents a different type of pioneer, from well-to-do to go-for-broke, in what became for all the most arduous journey in American history.
The jumping off point of the American pioneer, integrated with the phenomena of the American wilderness, and the fact that these 3 artists came together and worked together with landscape architects and with bank presidents and came up with this magnificent story is, I think, without match anywhere in the history of American art.
Almost 18,500 cubic yards of dirt. 258 large pieces of stone. 18,500 square feet of pavers.
There's the wagons coming into the valley where the buffalo were grazing and scare the buffalo, and they take off running and they round the corner and scare the flock of Canadian geese in a pond or a lake, and they burst out of the water.
It's an enormous scale. 58 geese, larger than life, 8-foot wingspan. 9 bison.
It's unbelievable what we've done in the amount of time we've done it in.
It's totally daunting when it's never been done before.
The vision was a combination of carefully designed sculpture and the flexibility of letting something run with the process of designing it. So, starting with a small park on a quarter city block and arriving at a fairly tightly designed European-style park with a plinth that has a fountain and water. From the tight design in that park to the bigger second park that had a great deal more space, this allowed more freedom for the landscape architect and the artists on what was a flat piece of land. Once it had been cleaned up, the design process with the landscape architect evolved into a decision to create a thematic dry riverbed with rocks cropping out. Then, the artists were able to imagine a wagon train heading west. A hunter would come in from the side. All of that led to buffalo stampeding down the sidewalk of the connecting block. In essence, tying together these two parks that are actually 3 blocks apart.
So the last thing I'll do is, once we get the pieces all done, well, from listening to this, I'm gonna go back just a second. In those meetings, we decided there's a lot of death, a lot of negative things that happen along the trail, as we've learned at the symposium. We elected to do the first 100 miles or so when it was fun and exciting, when they were looking forward to the next day. And we're trying to go figure out, that the excitement of what was there. Okay, when we got the bronzes done, we put them on a truck and we head to Omaha. I just got to tell you about some of the stories about the people involved with this project from the beginning. The truck drivers for this loved it. They were heroes every time they went to his truck stop to fill up. Because people would mob them and want to hear all about the story. And they said, we got to, they wanted to do the next one and the next one and the next one. So they did it once and they did it all the way through because it was something different and they really enjoyed it. So you've got, when we get to Omaha, we place it down on the rock where I designed it to go, make sure it fits. We marked where each hoof was. We drill a hole and we put a post up into the hoof of the feet or the end of the bottom of the wheel, and it fits down in and we cement it into the rock or into the stone pavers. So it's there forever. So on the wagon, we brought the mules, like the one I showed you, and the undercarriage first. We brought the top of the wagon second. I was listening to one of the speakers yesterday, and he talked about the undercarriage. I've discovered along the way that back in the day, you could, if you had the money, you could buy a finished undercarriage by Studebaker. But most just made up what they could and made it work. He talked about, yesterday he talked about the tongue, where the oxen or the mules, the horses were connected to. And there was a stiff tongue, a hardtail. But it didn't work going across the plains because you got hills. So when you think about it, you go over a hill, you come down the other side, you're going up the hill, it's coming down, the animals are now hanging or tiptoeing. And then it comes down and now they're, it drives them into the ground. So they've got to have a flex in the middle so that when they're going up, it flexes with the team and it can go up and down over hills. So this is, they had some posts underneath, just drop the box on top. And we had a little trap door, you go up in and weld that on top of the undercarriage. But now we had to also give a little bit of flex on the wheels because we wanted all the wheels to touch. I don't know why, but we wanted all the wheels to touch. So it made sure that they touched the ground and cemented in, and then we brought the box on top. When we did the first wagon, when we did the first one, they did their best, came in and measured my scale model with the rocks, and they tried to go get the rocks to bring it and make it fit my model, which was, they did a great job, except there was a couple of hooves that weren't touching the ground. So we had to go find rock and slide it underneath. So you look at the front left mule, there's a little rock underneath his hoof that we had to go find. Okay, this is a kind of a touching story that happened. And this is Bruce's wife, Kim. As we were working on this, working on the scale model, she decided on what age the kids were all going to be, and they're going to be, so I got to age them, the mother and father back also. She passed away from cancer during that stage, but she made sure that how she wanted me to portray all the kids and the family. But I went and enlarged it, and they came and Bruce and his family, they came and saw what I was working on, and it was a touching thing at my studio. But one of the son-in-laws came to me and he said, when we install grandma, is there something we can do for the grandkids to make it special for them? And I said, let me think about it. So we drop down and we mark where the dress fits the ground. And I took a chalk and I marked around the circle and lifted her back up. And then I polished the rough stone underneath the dress. So when the grandkids came, I gave them Sharpies. And they wrote love notes to Grandma. And then we all had a good cry when we dropped Grandma down into place. So when you go see the mom, you know that there's a story underneath her. I had a lot of help from the workers. They, again, like the truck drivers, these guys would battle to be able to work on our next project because it's so fun and different, installing bronzes. This is my assistant, Ben Hammond from Idaho. He came. His high school art teacher was my neighbor growing up. She moved to Idaho, was the art teacher, and his art teacher, and she called me and asked me if they could come bring their advanced art class down to visit a painter, my sculpture studio, and a museum as a field trip. So Ben comes in and sees, he loves sculpture, but he says, hey, this guy's making a living at this. This is crazy. So graduated from Rick's College, got a scholarship at BYU, comes down, and BYU at that time was teaching it how to weld and paint it pink. Had nothing to do with the figure. Drove him crazy, so he started calling me and wanting me, can I come sweep at your studio? Can I help you in any way? And he helped me for 15 years. I taught him too well. Now his career's taken off and he's off doing his thing. Leo was the photographer that came, I told you about, that filmed this for the documentary. And what a great thing that he was able to preserve this. A great friend of mine, Florence Hansen. Some of you might know her by Hansen Classics, did little porcelains of families, and did a great job, and she was really good with women and children. I'm not. I love to do the craggy old guys with lots of wrinkles and expression, and for some reason, women don't like that. So I would take my work up to her and have her teach me how to soften and make, children and women. And so she came to my studio and she said, "Oh, Blair, this is really beautiful." And then she got a little closer and she ended up taking my tool out of my hand and scooching me over and sat down on the chair. And I sat and watched her. And what a great friend and a great help. Way back, when we started this thing, and Ed Froughton and I were chosen to do this, we had a little breakfast meeting. How are we going to do it? And I said, well, we need to get a studio somewhere in between our houses. We're about 30 minutes apart. And we can have this studio, we can both work there. And he goes, no. You have your studio, I have mine. And I went white. I said, I thought we were doing this together. And he said, no, what's what you scared of? And I go, I've never done an animal, and it's going to be next to yours. So I left that meeting knowing that I had a lot to learn about comparative anatomy, how to do an animal, how to bring life to an animal like I do with figures, with people. It scared me out of my mind, but I sure tried. So I got a friend of mine, he hooked up his mules and went up and down the hills, and we videotaped them, and so I could figure out where the shoulder was, and if I could catch them in a mid-stride and what the muscles were doing on each one of that. And then I went and had to do some studies, went out in the pasture, and all these mules gathered around and were like in the middle of a huddle proposing for me. And I realized I had a lot to learn. And I told my assistant, I said, I need a mule skull so I can figure out what's underneath. So I thought that would be an easy task. They ended up getting the mule skull at Texas A&M's veterinarian school. And he goes, well, what do you need a mule skull for? And they told him, and he said, well, you need to talk to Susie. She was a graduate of ours that concentrated, specialized in the difference between a donkey, mule, and a horse. I called her up. Come to find out, she was a frustrated artist. She wanted to be an artist, but her dad said, no way. Her second love was mules. Became working with that. And she said, when we told her what I was doing, when can I come and how long can I stay? I said, I'm talking to you on the phone. I don't know what this, what I'm in for. She comes to my studio and absolutely rips me apart. I had one mule enlarged. She walked in and said, first thing, there's too much horse in that mule. Mules are front wheel drive. Horses are rear wheel drive. Big quarter horses, big rear end. A mule is front wheel drive, big shoulders, little rear end, short neck, big head, big ears, And by the way, your ears are on backwards. So I cut the ears and I switched places. That was great for me because she was excited and she knew it forwards and backwards and was willing to teach me. She came back another time, and when I had more of the mules up, and she just dove in, and she stayed with me for several days and was just teaching me every joint and every muscle and all the connection and how to make that feel like the animal. Even to the point where we went out to the pasture and had me stick my finger up his nose and figure out what's inside. It was great. Not that part, but everything else was good. So I had a lot of people helped me do this, and I'm grateful to be just a small part of this team that Ed Frotton, Kent Olberg, Jim Reeves. He passed away before he had cancer, before bronze was ever put down. But you look at that canvas that he laid for us. It's just absolutely amazing. The landscape, the trees, the bushes, going up and down. What a masterful job. And I think that I really look Bruce Lawrenson for keeping with it. It's just amazing too. I've still got more to do. I've been at it. We started this in 2000. We're at 2022, and I'm still working on the park. My next will be another mountain man, and then an Indian, his wife holding a baby sitting on the rock. And then I get to take a break. But what a ride. And I'd love for you now to go and look at the park in a different way and see the stories that were behind all of this. It just didn't show up overnight. There's so many, my wife puts it in a way, she says, just they don't understand going from the idea, the maquette, the scale model, the full size, the foundry, all the things, the installation, and then rinse and repeat. Maquette, model, rinse and repeat. That's what I've been doing all this time. So these are some of my favorites. Of course, I'm showing you my work. My favorite is to come down there at night, because Jim Reeves saw that and did the lighting in a way that it's dusk at 2 in the morning. It's a soft light. It doesn't anything glaring. And so you just feel comfortable walking through the park. And you go back to this deciding between the scale of one half or 1.5 and 1 1/4. I like this. It's relatable. You know it's bigger than life, but it's not overpowering bigger. So again, when Bruce Lawrenson saw what I did with my first wagon and my family, this is Bruce, his daughter, his wife. And now the fun thing, the guy leaning over, reaching around, looking over the shoulder of his sister on the back of the horse, he's now the president of the bank. He's the 6th generation of the Lawrensons that own First National Bank. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Another little thing that design, I wanted to put a plow, but I needed to go this direction, coming down to the mother and then back up the other side. So I made a left-handed plow. I don't know if that ever exists. It does in Omaha. And there's my son as a 16-year-old. It's called Going Hunting. And this one up here, the wagon master, is my neighbor Chad Costley. That I had him with the big handle stud with a big mustache. There he is. So now you can know there's Chad. But to do now, going from a walking mule, when I was doing the oxen, I sent pictures off to Susie. What'd she tell me? There's too much horse in that. There's too much equine in that bull line. I got too much horse now. She taught me all the things about an ox. And then I had to do a horse in action, another big challenge. So yesterday, I was at the park walking through, and a young family. And I walked up and said, where are they from and how they, and they were walking through the park, and I told them I was a sculptor. Of course, they, are you kidding? And she says, we're horse people. That mule is alive. I love the expression on the face. And I said, thank you. You don't know how hard it was to get to that point. And the other guy and her husband worked for Budweiser with the teams. And he said, those harnesses are spot on. And I just going, I left the park feeling really nice.
They do, they look real.
And another little story, I'm sorry I'm going long. Another little story is when I did, when we were working on this, we finished phase 2, all the wagons, all 4 wagons. And there was a Native American that he's a member of the bank, and I guess he was downstairs and he was saying, pioneers are great, but the Native Americans have been here a whole lot longer than pioneers. Where are they? Why aren't they represented? And they called up to Brenda, who I've been working with as the VP for the bank all these years. And she came down and talked to him and said, come up with me to the office. And she laid out Jim Reeves' drawings and said, it's right here. It's coming. The whole section of this is going to be represented to the Native Americans. And so just to show we're not doing this because you've complained, it's always been in the works. So we're installing these, and there's a guy standing off the side of the barrier. And Brenda recognizes him, walks over, and it's that same guy. And he said, this is a good day. My people have arrived. And he started telling her about the markings I put on the horse. That the circle of the eye is for the intent of the blessing of being strong-sighted in battle. And each of the little paintings has symbolism of war battles and the handprints and all that. So he was telling her that I had done my research and it was there. Another fun thing is how people enjoy just being there and seeing this. And kids just love to pet the geese and the mules and the oxen. And I just love to sit and watch. And kind of a fun thing is that we've signed all our work in a little, to go try to find it. We're at the back of every sculpture that are connected together, we put our signature. So challenge if you want to do that, so go find out where our signatures are at. This is a shot taken at the end of installation of our first wagon, waiting for the shuttle to take us to the airport on phase 1. And I don't remember anything about this, but it showed up on the camera. Have fun. Thank you for this opportunity.